Hello everyone! Happy October! Welcome to the first session of October, which is our spooky month, the month of Halloween. Our whole theme this month is all around everything spooky. And so we're going to start off our first session by diving into the history of spooky dance and horror. There's actually a long-standing history between the world of dance and the world of horror and the connections that the two have with each other and portrayals of one within the other. Think of, for example, the film Black Swan. It's a pretty well-known film, and you've got this ballet story, but it's also a psychological horror. And you see this a lot in movies, and this connection is easy because dance is all about portraying, things with your body and emotions, and it can create this physical representation of any kind of distress that is very visceral and intense, and it's easy to see on the screen or on stage. And additionally, there is this association in dance with physical pain and dancers pushing their bodies to the limits, to the extreme, and it can cause mental and physical distress. And so, as a society, we've picked up on those things and we've latched onto these stories and thrown them into the extreme to create this kind of dance horror genre where the horror happens within the world of dance. And you'll see lots of other films in recent years kind of continuing to take this on. I can think of, for example, films such as Suspiria or the movie Climax. But other films also do tend to just use dance to tell the horror aspects of their story, and it's not about the horror within the dance, but the dance is just a good way to tell that story. For example, the movie Annihilation uses kind of a dance between the horror creature and the main character to display that tension and fear and aggression. And there are many current examples of this, but this pairing goes way back. It's not just a new thing. It's existed for a very long time, and we can see the use of dance to portray creepiness in cult classics, things like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, things like Thriller. We've got that connection between dance and creepy things, and it continues farther back than that. And we have pieces such as something called the Rite of Spring, which is a ballet, and stories like The Red Shoes, which is a gruesome fairy tale about dance. I'm going to take some time now to elaborate on some of the specifics of these more historical origins of dance and horror and their connection. So we're going to start with The Red Shoes, which is a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, so it's been around for a long time, and it's about a girl with red shoes who cannot stop dancing. She puts on the shoes and her feet just dance out of control. She can't control where she's going and she cannot stop. And eventually this girl dances past an executioner, and she begs the executioner to cut off her feet to stop her from dancing. And so he chops off her feet, and the feet actually continue in the shoes, and they dance away on their own. And in some versions of the story, in the original version, she's haunted by these dancing feet for quite a while as well. And since then, there's been many, many iterations of the Red Shoes. It's a very classic story. There are movies made about it. There's a ballet about it. It's a very traditional dance story, and it has those roots of horror and that possession of uncontrollable urges, and it's a little gruesome with the cutting off of feet. You can also look at the start of displaying horror within dances as with a piece called The Rite of Spring. The Rite of Spring is a short ballet, and it was composed by Igor Stravinsky and choreographed by Vaslav Nijinsky, and it premiered in 1913. So Stravinsky is a Russian composer, and he was known for also composing for some more classical ballets such as Firebird. But Nijinsky, the choreographer, he was a dancer, and then he was a choreographer, and he was known for creating controversy with his modern ballets, such as The Rite of Spring, and also one called L'après-midi d'une faune. And he created a lot of uproar and diversity as he had these very non-traditional dances and styles and stories for ballet at the time. Ballet was known for being all about things that are beautiful. They were stories of love and death as well, but in a more romantic sense. And he put some much more visceral things on the stage. there was some violence, death in a more gruesome way, more sexual things, and so he really stirred things up, and the Rite of Spring is one that really did that. In the Rite of Spring, in the first performance, it actually caused so much controversy with the violent, gruesome horror aspects of it during the opening scene that it is said that the reactions from people in the audience created so much chaos and commotion and noise that the dancers on stage could not hear the orchestral cues from the orchestra playing the music for them. So it was really just kind of shocking at the time. Around the same time as this modern form of ballet is starting to come out, and we're seeing this change, and we are seeing these horror elements within it. We are also seeing the rise of the modern dance movement overall, as it starts in the 20th century, right at the beginning, with German Expressionism. And German Expressionism, obviously, it started in Germany, and it was part of a larger art movement with films and painting and art and those things, but there was a dance portion of it, and there was dance expressionism. And the movement was all about straying away from the rigid technical forms of ballet and incorporating body movements that were more raw and that communicated one's inner feelings. And so it was less about the perfectionism, and there was a bit of a tendency to portray more ugly things that we might not traditionally see, and this could include supernatural or horror elements. Unfortunately, the German Expressionism movement was not favored by the Nazi regime, and one of the most prominent figures in founding German Expressionism was a Nazi collaborator, so we're not really going to focus on any of her work, and because she collaborated with them, and German Expressionism was squashed within Europe, and it kind of got destroyed. There were some remnants of it and some students of it who, however, managed to kind of branch out and continue on their own, and one such person was Hanya Holm. Hanya Holm was German-born, but she went and pursued an American citizenship, and so she became an American dancer and choreographer, and she is now known as one of the big four founders of American modern dance. And her choreography was a little less horror-based in nature than some of the other people within German Expressionism. But she is quoted as saying, "I want to see a sign of passion. I want to see the raw if struggling to express itself. A work must have blood." So you can see that there was still this very intense, visceral aspect to the dance, and showing real emotions and things that are very intense. We've got the sign of blood, and so that kind of distress there that plays into the horror aspects. And some of Holm's most noted works include the pieces Trend and Tragic Exodus, if you want to check those out. Today, in dances representing horror stories and different horror themes, we often see contemporary styles being used, which would be the most common. But elements of modern dance, musical theater, acro, contortionism, or kind of any combination of above are also often used. And these dances use a variety of different styles and movements to portray this horror, creepy theme on stage. Playing characters, right? So either characters that we recognize or stereotypes of characters. So you might see things like haunted circus, haunted clowns. You might see mental hospitals or abandoned buildings, cults, things like that, that through playing those characters and the use of costuming, they're really able to play up and set the vibes on stage for this type of horror dance. But the type of movement and the specific styles are also very important elements that they use to create the creepy feeling in dance. Some of these movements include sharp, stiff movements. So you might see sometimes a sequence of very rigid movements with lots of pausing in between, hitting from one frozen pose to another, or sharp movements contrasted with flowing movements. Or slow, smooth movements is also something common that you might see. You might see a lot of repeated movements, so very repetitive, sharp movements over and over again, or movements that are completed with a lot of tension behind them, where the body is very tense as you complete these movements, which might be used to kind of portray the idea of fighting against something or fighting the loss of control, or you might have very thrown movements that do show the loss of control. And this is something common that you'll see in pieces that show maybe some aspects of possession or fear or battling against some supernatural element. And as well, when we're using the idea of creepy and horror up on stage, you see a lot of movement with strange angles or body positions, which can be very unsettling and add to that dimension of just horrific. And this is where that kind of contortionism element can often come in. If you see, or acro, if you see the body moving in ways that you were not used to seeing it move, the body is folding in unnatural ways, it's very disconcerting to a lot of people. It's very alarming. And so you can use that alarm, that confusion, to really create a sense of discomfort and horror at what is going on up on the stage. So there's a lot of different elements that can be used, but overall we see a lot of unusual movements, things that you wouldn't see in a traditional dance, things that you might not associate with traditional styles of dance, because those are what you expect. And by doing the unexpected, the non-traditional, you're creating this sense of, oh, it's unexpected, it's unnatural, and that puts people on edge, and it's not what they're expecting to see, and helps build that kind of tense feelings that help portray the horror vibe on stage. And there are lots of different ways that we can see people doing this. I am going to include lots of links down below, links to articles about a lot of the things that I have mentioned. Some of them I used kind of to do my own research on this, and they can provide some extra details for you as well. And I'm going to provide a link to lots and lots of videos like a video on YouTube of the Rite of Spring, or videos of just more recent dances from various different dance troupes and companies that have done creepy style dances, so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about and see all of the different styles that are portrayed on stage through dance and creepiness. And of course, also you can check out any of the movies that I mentioned. I haven't seen them all, but they're supposed to be quite good. And the ones I have seen, I have quite enjoyed. And so feel free to check those out. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of deep dive into the history of dance and horror and found something interesting in it. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next session. Don't forget to like videos, subscribe to us so that you can catch our weekly videos, and follow us on our social media so you hear all of our updates and get the links to our live events. Make sure you check out our Discord. It's where we do most of our communication, as well as our Instagram.